The conference room fell silent as Michael gathered his employee badge and walked toward the door, his boss's laughter still echoing in his ears. "Don't bother coming back," the words had stung worse than the sneers from his colleagues who'd watched it all happen. But what none of them knew was that 3 determined 9-year-old girls had been listening to their father's phone call that morning, and they'd already started working on a plan that would change everything. If you love stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, you're in the right place. Please subscribe to Sage Stories and hit that like button. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now let me tell you what happened next. Michael Torres had been working at Henderson Marketing Solutions for almost 3 years. It wasn't his dream job, but it paid the bills and allowed him to provide for Emma, Lily, and Sophie, his 9-year-old triplet daughters. Ever since his wife Sarah passed away 2 years ago from cancer, every single day felt like he was trying to keep a dozen plates spinning in the air at once. Wake up at 5:30, pack 3 lunches, make sure 3 backpacks had the right homework, drop the girls at school, rush to work, try to focus while worrying about everything, pick them up, help with homework, make dinner, and collapse into bed only to do it all again. His coworkers didn't really understand. They'd make comments when he'd leave at 5 o'clock, sharp to pick up his daughters. They'd roll their eyes when he couldn't join happy hours or weekend team-building events. But Michael kept his head down and did his work. He was good at his job, developing marketing campaigns that brought in real results for clients. He just couldn't work the same 70-hour weeks that some of the younger, childless employees put in. His boss, Richard Henderson, was a different breed entirely. The man had built his company from nothing and expected everyone to have the same relentless dedication he did. He'd never married, had no kids, and seemed to view any life outside the office as a weakness. He'd made his feelings about Michael's situation clear on multiple occasions with passive-aggressive comments about commitment and priorities. Things came to a head on a rainy Tuesday in October. Sophie had called Michael at 2 in the afternoon, her voice small and scared. She'd fallen during recess and the school nurse thought she might need stitches. Michael grabbed his coat and headed for the door, stopping briefly to tell Richard he had a family emergency. Richard looked up from his computer with cold eyes. "Another emergency, Torres? That's the 3rd time this month." Michael felt his face flush. "My daughter fell at school. The nurse says she needs stitches. And you're the only person who can handle this." Richard leaned back in his chair. "What about the Parker account presentation? We have that in 2 hours. I have everything ready. Jenny can present it. I trained her on the entire campaign." Michael was already backing toward the door, thinking of Sophie sitting in the nurse's office, scared and hurting. Richard stood up, his voice getting louder. "This is exactly the problem with you. You're not fully committed to this company. You're always running off to deal with your kids." Several heads popped up from cubicles around the office. Michael felt every eye on him. "Sir, my daughter is hurt. I need to go." "You know what, Torres?" Richard's face twisted into something ugly. "I'm tired of making accommodations for you. You're fired. Pack your desk and get out." The words landed like a physical blow. Michael stood frozen for a moment while some of his co-workers whispered, and a few actually laughed, joining in Richard's cruelty like it was some kind of entertainment. He thought about fighting back, about defending himself, but Sophie was waiting. So he walked to his desk, grabbed his personal items, and left without another word. At the emergency room, Sophie got 4 stitches in her chin while Emma and Lily, whom Michael had picked up from school on the way, held her hands and told her jokes to keep her from crying. On the drive home, Michael tried to keep his voice steady as he told them he'd lost his job. He didn't mention the humiliation or the laughter. He just said the company was making changes. Emma, always the most observant of the 3, looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Were you on the phone with your boss this morning?" "We heard you arguing," Michael sighed. He'd thought they were still asleep. "Yeah, sweetie, that was him." "He was mean to you," Lily said quietly. "We heard him yelling." That night, after the girls were supposed to be asleep, they had a meeting in Emma's room. They'd been doing this since their mom died, gathering to solve problems together. Tonight they had a big one. "Dad tries so hard for us," Emma whispered. "And that mean man fired him just because Dad takes care of us. We need to fix this." Sophie said, her bandaged chin making her even more determined. Mom would have known what to do. Lily, who was usually the quietest, suddenly sat up straight. What if we could show them? Show everyone at Dad's work how good he really is? How? Emma asked. Remember that marketing campaign Dad was working on? For the toy company? He had all those papers spread out on the dining room table last week. Lily's eyes were bright. He kept saying if he could just get kids to test his ideas, he'd know exactly what would work. The next morning, while Michael was in the shower, the girls went through his home office. They found the Parker account materials, a campaign for a new line of educational toys. Michael had developed an entire strategy based on what he thought kids would actually want, not what adults assumed they'd want. The girls read through everything, and then Emma had an idea. They spent the entire day working. They filmed videos of themselves, playing with similar toys, wrote down exactly what they liked and didn't like, and had Sophie's entire third-grade class fill out a survey during lunch about what made a toy fun. They interviewed kids at the park that afternoon, collecting dozens of opinions. Then they put it all together into a presentation on Emma's tablet. By Wednesday evening, they had something real, actual data from real kids, and they had a plan. Thursday morning, the girls convinced Michael to drive them to his old office building before school. He thought they just wanted to see where he worked. Instead, Emma marched straight into the building with her sisters flanking her, walked up to the reception desk, and asked to see Mr. Henderson. The receptionist looked confused. Do you have an appointment? Tell him it's about the Parker account, Emma said with a confidence that shocked Michael. Tell him we have research he needs to see before his 2:00 presentation. 5 minutes later, they were sitting in Richard's office. The man looked annoyed and puzzled in equal measure. What is this about? Emma pulled out her tablet. Our dad is Michael Torres. You fired him on Tuesday for taking care of my sister when she got hurt. But the thing is, you fired the person who actually understood your clients. She turned the tablet around and started the presentation. Video after video of kids explaining exactly what they wanted in educational toys, survey data showing clear preferences, testimonials that perfectly aligned with Michael's original strategy. The girls had even included suggestions for improvements he hadn't thought of. Richard watched in silence. His expression slowly changed from irritation to interest to something that might have been shame. The Parker account wants toys for kids, Lily spoke up. But nobody asked any actual kids what they wanted. Our dad did. That's why his campaign was good. And he could only do that because he understands kids, Sophie added, touching her bandaged chin. Because he's a good dad who actually pays attention to us. Richard sat back in his chair, quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked at Michael, who'd been standing in the doorway, completely stunned by his daughter's courage. Torres, these girls just did more market research in 2 days than my entire team has done in 2 months. Richard's voice was different now, thoughtful. I was wrong. About you, about your priorities, about what matters. Michael felt Emma grab his hand. I'd like to offer you your job back, with a raise, and flexible hours for family emergencies. Richard stood up and extended his hand. And I'd like to hire your daughters as junior consultants on the Parker account. Paid, of course. The presentation Michael gave that afternoon, enhanced by his daughter's research, landed the Parker account and became the biggest win in Henderson Marketing Solutions history. But more than that, it changed the entire culture of the office. Richard implemented family-friendly policies, hired more working parents, and even created a childcare partnership with a local center. Michael still thinks about that day, watching his 3 small daughters march into that building with their shoulders squared and their hearts full of love. They'd learned something from him about not giving up on people. But he'd learned something from them too, about the fierce power of standing up for the people you love. Sometimes the impossible isn't really impossible at all. Sometimes it just takes 3 9-year-old girls who believe their dad deserves better, who remember what their mother taught them about fighting for what's right, and who understand that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the world. Michael's daughters showed an entire company that taking care of the people who matter doesn't make you less professional. It makes you more human. And in the end, that's what changes everything. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear about a time when someone stood up for you, or when you stood up for someone else. Share your story in the comments below, because kindness has a way of multiplying when we talk about it.